Hey everyone, welcome to Maych TV. I am Maych. Thank you so much for joining me. So I've been having a good old think about Liverpool's woes after 2 draws in a week left us feeling absolutely abject and dejected once again, because it felt like there'd been a real battle won the ESL in the toilet, fans unified over common causes, Liverpool fans being motivated towards having really in-depth and potentially brilliant future conversations with the ownership with regards to getting fans on the board and maybe fan ownership. We threw it away against Leeds United, which I could live with because of the climate at the time. But then Newcastle turned up, put the big guns, all the big 4 on the pitch, and then, threw it away in the last minute. Devastated. So look, I've been thinking about Liverpool's goal scoring woes, and obviously what happens is Liverpool don't score loads and loads of goals. The obvious shout that comes out is Liverpool need a goal scorer. That's what this video is going to be about. Do I agree? Do I disagree? I agree, by the way, spoilers. But I want to have a little bit more of a wider conversation around why it's maybe not quite as cut and dry as all that. But first, I was on the Hold the L show this week over on the Super 6 YouTube channel, talking about the greatest Champions League moments of all time. I don't really want to talk about the Champions League, but it was a perfect opportunity to remind you some of the brilliant things Liverpool have done in recent years, and of course a little bit of a shout out for Istanbul. Here's a clip.
And the question this week is, what is the greatest Champions League moment in the history of the competition? 20 seconds on the clock. Go.
I think just in terms of longevity and in terms of being the greatest Champions League final and obviously the greatest Champions League comeback of all time as well, I've gone for the miracle of Istanbul. Take your pick from that game. It could be Jerzy Dudek. He not only got a dance after him, but he got a top charting pop single off the back of Do the Dudek with Steven Gerrard's big header, Clive Tildesley. Hello, here we go.
Yes, all you've got to do is head over there. Check out the show. It's good. I have a really, really good laugh on that show. It's got proper old school social club vibes. With some of my good mates, some other football clubs as well, talking about, footy stuff. So go over there, drop a like, leave your thoughts on it, and there'll be a little poll in their community tab. Just vote for anyone but me. But it's going to be Flav. Vote for Flav, because there's no way Tottenham can have the greatest Champions League moment of all time. And really, it probably should be Nini as well, because Chelsea, check out the one he's gone for. Madness. Go check out the show. Anyway, look, right, Liverpool. Do Liverpool need a goal scorer? Yes, they do. But maybe not quite in the way that we think. Now, obviously, for algorithmic reasons, shall we say, I've put Erling Haaland in the thumbnail. I could have easily put Kylian Mbappe, but it didn't occur to me until this very moment when I was talking. I put Luis Suarez in because I think Luis Suarez is a nice link to the past and also to the future as well, because we've seen links with him return to Liverpool, which I think is a bit of a non-starter, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. However, the reason why I think it's important to discuss this is because Liverpool have got 3-4 now with Jota lads who are all quite good at scoring goals. Now, obviously, to varying degrees, Mohamed Salah is a supreme goal scorer. He became the first Liverpool player ever in Premier League history, anyway, to score more than 20 goals in 3 seasons. Robbie Fowler did it in, I think, a couple. Suarez did it as well. It's brilliant. Absolutely wonderful stuff. He's an incredible goal scorer, and I think that gets overlooked a little bit sometimes. Not by many, but certainly by some. I think particularly because he plays from the right, and I think he gets lumped into the sort of Messi, Ronaldo category, which is a pretty damn good category to be in, but people don't think of those guys as like strikers, even though they've both played centre forward or whatever. People see them as forwards or wide forwards or whatever. Maybe that's just me. What we think about when we think about a goal scorer, I think people think about Luis Suarez, and people think about Fernando Torres, and people think about Robbie Fowler. The one thing I think Liverpool are definitely lacking this season is probably is someone with that little bit of extra composure in front of goal. Now, it's mad because the player that I really want to talk about for a number of reasons is someone like Daniel Sturridge. So he gets a little bit overlooked sometimes because obviously his career kind of fizzled out a little bit to the point where he's obviously had the ban from football, and he's currently clubless at the moment. But Daniel Sturridge was the last great, I think, centre forward that Liverpool have had. He was very much in the same mould, I think, as Fernando Torres, and Robbie Fowler's just wonderfully talented and just born to stick the ball in the back of the net. Give him a sniff and he'll score a goal for you. Now, the problem with the Daniel Sturridge thing is a couple of things. Daniel Sturridge, I think the way Liverpool have been constructed, and I think the way Liverpool are struggling in front of goal this season is indicative of a wider thing, and why we're seeing certain football clubs, rise in these circumstances over other ones. And I think Liverpool as a team in general are constructed around a bunch of lads that just love to fight and love to work hard and sweat and die and hurt, and then they'll through that endeavour they'll create a load of chances and eventually they'll score enough to beat you. And if they don't do that, then the lads at the other end of the pitch will be so warlike and resolute, from the best goalie in the world and Van Dijk and all the people around them, that they're going to keep it out. So it's going to be 0-0 because you're not going to score against us, and while we're keeping it to 0-0, we're just going to absolutely continue to kick at your door and smack at your door and smash our heads and bodies against your door until eventually you give up the ghost and we win. That's that. I think that's how it's been born. Whereas what I think we've seen this season, in the absence of fans, I think I've definitely seen the re-rise of the number 10 in the Premier League. So you've seen Bruno Fernandes, obviously not been in great form of late, but everyone's raving about Bruno Fernandes. People have been raving about the likes of Jack Grealish. People have been raving about James Maddison, Mason Mount, etc., etc., etc. Bunch of guys who are just so wonderfully technically proficient. And maybe in other circumstances of the seasons, maybe they haven't shone quite as brightly, because it is a very, very particular skill set to be a very, very good number 10 in the Premier League. And we haven't had loads, and the ones that we've had stand out because they tend to be amazing. Some of the best footballers ever to play the game. So I think there's a little thing here in Liverpool's problem. And whereas I think a goal scorer might solve a number of those problems, because right now, you could just do with someone who likes to stick, or another person other than Salah to stick the ball in the back of the net. I think there's a case where Liverpool want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because my belief in my heart of hearts is that when football returns to normal, we've got fans back in stadia, I think that environment will favour the Liverpool players. So I think they're built to exist in that environment. They're a hardened, sort of like formed in the molten earth kind of team. They're not like a prancy, skillful, showboaty kind of football team, although they certainly have those sorts of elements. And I think you've seen players who maybe in the cauldron of Anfield or real football with fans on top of you maybe wouldn't have been as successful. And I think in this instance, I think we're seeing teams who've got maybe slightly more technically gifted footballers having a little bit of better luck in that regard. Now, look, it's not a fully realised thought, and I haven't got any data to back it up or whatever, but it's my generalised feeling on this is we're seeing a little bit more of that. Liverpool just could do with a few more clinical people, but the question is, will they still need those clinical people when football returns to normal next season? The answer is probably yes, but I still think you need to be able to do both. And again, let's go back to Daniel Sturridge as the point in this. And Fernando Torres kind of falls into this as well to some extent. And Liverpool have had his Maych alone. If you go out and get a goal scorer, people think a clinical goal scorer will solve all of your problems, and it might solve a number of Liverpool's problems. And look, because goals solve all kinds of manner of ills in football. They paper over cracks, and they can, guide you to titles and all kinds of things. Of course they can, because ultimately you've got to beat the teams put in front of you. All these things. It's just words at this point. But my point is this. You get someone, and if they don't suit what you do, particularly the way that Liverpool's side is constructed, you run the risk of collapsing the whole house of cards, or they become a domino as a toppling effect that takes out the entire team as a result. And we've seen that in a number of ways. So, for example, like you take out Virgil van Dijk out of Liverpool's team, and you put a number of other centre-halves in who aren't anywhere near our first team, and what they lack in other areas of their game has an intangible knock-on effect to how the rest of the football team plays. You take Jordan Henderson out, the same kind of thing as well, in a variety of circumstances. So I think, when Daniel Sturridge being a good example of this, absolute clinical, wonderful talent, great footballer, and we'll never know whether a prime Daniel Sturridge might have fitted Jurgen Klopp. He might well have done. We just don't know these things. But the suspicion is that, just look, because of his physicality, he might not have been able to do that, and maybe he didn't have the mindset. We just don't know these things. Someone like a Fernando Torres, put Fernando Torres at the tip of Liverpool's spear, and he might go and get 30 goals. But what's the knock-on impact of the guys around him? Do you have to make him the focal point in order for that to work? I don't know the answers to these questions, but it's a possibility as well. And the other thing as well, when you build your team around a player, so you make a goal scorer, and goal scorers are naturally selfish people. Think about all the criticisms that you do. The main criticism you see levelled at Mohamed Salah is always a bit selfish. He's a goal scorer. No one was asked that Alan Shearer was a bit selfish. No one was asked that Fowler was selfish. Rush, etc., because you've got to have someone whose roles in football teams, and someone's role is ultimately to take the calculated risk that he's going to be capable of putting the ball in the back of the net in a given chance and opportunity. And that's the sort of the thing, that the curse and the blessing of centre forwards, because they're more likely to be able to do it. But of course, if they miss it, you've geared everything towards this guy, and maybe you've actually passed up opportunities that other players would lay in. But then if you had another player in that situation, would they be in the right situation in the first place? Yeah, and you end up in that sort of kind of mental conundrum on this. And the problem is, of course, if you then build your team around that one guy, what happens if that guy gets injured? What Liverpool have got right now, and it's hard to make this case right now because of the recency bias of seeing Liverpool being a bit crap this season, but Liverpool are largely conditioned as a squad that you can swap bits and pieces out without losing too much. Well, up until this season, actually, with the exception of the front three, because we haven't had true quality. We've got it now with Jota, but again, I think it's been undercut by just fatigue and overwork and all those kind of things as well. But Liverpool, you can take one guy out and it doesn't totally upset the apple cart, generally speaking. You can cope with that Van Dijk for a bit, because Matip and Gomez are good enough to come in and do a solid job in his absence. You can bring Firmino in for one game if you have to, a la Bayern Munich a couple of seasons ago. Drops in at Anfield, has a really good game in centre-half, brilliant job done. Go back and carry on doing your bit. When you've got someone who is the tip of the spear, you'd end up needing two, and it's impossible almost to have two of those guys. What Liverpool need really potentially is another one. It's another Jota. It's another man. It's another lad who performs a number of the functions, who can play across the front three, because that's how you maintain a squad. That's how you keep a squad happy, and squad unity is a massive thing for Liverpool as well. But also leaves you to a situation where if you have to leave Salah out for a game, that's not the end of you. Look at the state of the Liverpool sides over the Premier League era, who've been built largely around one and a half, two footballers, two at best. You know, you had Maych alone being the absolute centre forward of our dreams for a couple of years at the end of the 90s and the early noughties, and then injuries started to rack up, and we were okay for a while because you had Robbie Fowler and you had Emile Heskey who sort of counterbalanced that weight. Fowler moves on, Liverpool never replace him adequately, and then you're just on a sliding slope again. Then Fernando Torres comes in. Fernando Torres is the absolute man, but what happens when Torres isn't there? It's David and go. And then you move on, and so on and so forth. You know, you've got to have cover in those positions, and I think Liverpool constructed in the right way. So if there's going to be a goal scorer, and I agree, look, Liverpool just needs someone who's, I think, just a bit more composed and a bit more about scoring the goals. That makes perfect logical sense to me. But is there a guy out there who does it all as well? Because look at a good example as well, look at Thiago. Thiago, I think, will be a brilliant fit for Liverpool from next season onwards. But you've got to be careful sometimes that you can bring in sort of wonderfully technically gifted footballers, but can they do the rest? Naby Keita, good example of that as well. He's got the technical attributes on the ball to match anyone, and probably even better than a lot of the players in our squad. But you also need to have all that steel and grit and work rate and determination and ability to drag other players up with you as well. You need to have that to fit into this Liverpool team. And if you start pulling it out and replacing it with guys who are technically gifted but don't have that, you end up back to being the Liverpool team that Liverpool have had at times throughout the last 30 years of the Premier League, who can beat most teams on their day, who can win a lot of football matches, but are just lacking that X factor, that something, that missing ingredient that's so intangible, it's very hard to put your finger on, but it undermines what you're trying to do on a season-by-season basis. So, yeah, Liverpool, go and buy a centre-forward who scores loads of goals, who's amazing, who can be a talisman for us, sure, go and do that, but he's got to be the right fit, so, you know, good luck. Right, look, yeah, just some general music on this. We'll have a more conversation about transfer stuff in the coming weeks, because let's be honest, the season's crap. I don't really want to talk about the season, so I'd rather have flights to fancy. If anything you want me to discuss, let me know in the comments below. If you want to do go over and check out the Super 6 YouTube channel as well. I'm on it sort of alternate weeks at the moment with Chris, so it's either me or Chris, so it's always a good show, in my opinion anyway. So do go and check that, drop a like on this video, and if you want more from me and more Liverpool content, obviously the Redmen TV YouTube channel, but also the redmentv.com is our Liverpool Liverpool streaming service. I'll produce that, I own that, and I'm really, really proud of the documentary content and series and interviews that go on there. They're not just people talking about footy now and week in, week out, but it's a little bit like a little Netflix for Liverpool fans. So that's the redmentv.com. Anyway, have an amazing, amazing weekend. Hopefully Liverpool can stuff United. Wouldn't that be great? Make us all smile again. Yeah.